Walt has asked me to present his yearly presentation on the VTI. This is called the status report. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Um, uh, as Roger was saying, IOTA owns the rights to the IOTA VTI, but Video Timers manufactures and distributes that device under an exclusive license and pays IOTA a royalty for each one. The oversight of our interests is held in a steering committee that consists of Tony Berry, Dave Galt, Steve Preston, and Chad Ellington, and Paul Maley. So the intellectual property and is a valuable commodity, and so we want to take good care of that. Next slide, please. Video Timers itself is a sole proprietorship created in 2011 by Walt Morgan, Sandy Bumgarner as engineer. We see here that during that span of time, since 2011 to March of 2016, Sandy created the original printed circuit board and 24 variations, culminating in the present version 3.8, which has proven to be satisfactory in all respects with no further changes contemplated. Pretty amazing. Next slide, please. And we sure appreciate that work. The VTI has evolved from version 1 through the current version 3. There were some changes, obviously. With any piece of hardware, you improve it as you go along, and so luckily Sandy was able to provide the support to improve the printed circuit boards and modify various parts so that things like fuses could be added, reduce power supply, and so on, reduce power consumption, which we all care about a lot out in the field. Next slide, please. This is the version 2, which used an Arduino board and an internal GPS. If we go on to the next slide, please. This GlobalSat GPS was discontinued, a constant problem that we have, it seems, on all of our hardware pieces. Things just stop getting made. And the Arduino board turned out to be poor quality, and we had to reject way too many of them in order to be able to ship a sufficient number of quality products. Next slide, please. So we shifted to a new generation of GPS, which is GlobalTop's PA6H, redesigned the printed circuit board, and of course, once you change the GPS, you have to rewrite the software. The result is the VTI version 3. So we started selling that in March of 2015. Next slide, please. Inside the version 3, you see that there's a completely different layout with a microprocessor on the board, surface mounted, the PA6H GPS with its long cable to the antenna. This also provides the option of an external antenna, and a lithium-ion battery to allow the device to remember the catalog that's downloaded from the satellites between power off and power on cycles to improve its accuracy. Next, please. So here's the two versions. You may see them around. I have a VTI version 2 in my score box, which I used last night, and I have a version 3 that I'll be putting in my observatory at home. They both generate the same character shapes, so iMovie is able to recognize the characters from either version 2 or version 3, and probably version 1 as well. Next, please. Here's the splash screen for IOTA the VTI version 3, and it shows the battery status that tells the battery was okay during power down and was able to save the catalog information from the satellites. Next, please. The position screen has been updated to give the status of this error mode, transient or persistent error mode. There's an internal dip switch that lets you select these two. I assume that this means that the persistent errors have to be cleared by powering the machine off and on, but I'll have to ask Walt for details on that. Next, please. Oh, that's just, I'll let that go. Here's the error notification display format for version 3. In transient mode, the error is displayed for only 5 seconds, and in persistent mode, I guess it stays on the screen and forces you to deal with it. Next, please. There we go. In persistent mode, errors will continue to be displayed, and they created these errors by artificially putting something over the device to block it from the satellite signals. It's delivered set for transient mode, so yeah, persistent mode. This is the problem with even with space hardware, as Steve Conard knows. The stuff is so reliable you can test it forever and it'll never fail. So how do you calculate a failure rate? So persistent mode was developed so that they could keep those transient messages on the screen for those very, very infrequent times when there's some sort of failure. Next, please. We have some hardware challenges facing us again. This titling, the video titling integrated circuit, the MAX 7456, that actually puts the titles onto the video frames, has been discontinued. But a large quantity of this chip has been purchased, and so apparently we're okay for the foreseeable future to make lots more VTI version 3s. And then, of course, the GPS firmware, they may change that firmware in new deliveries of the GPS chip, and therefore it might be necessary, and probably will be necessary, to modify the firmware to handle the new types of messages that come out of the GPS antenna. Next, please. Blank slide. Not sure what happened there. I know that somewhere in the presentation there is a summary of the sales to date, some charts of that, and they may not be showing up, so we may have to deal with those. Okay, go on to the next one, if there's anything left in the presentation. If not, we'll finish up the rest of it later.
There's a technical question that was thrown at me about why the two on the time inserter, when you're playing back the flashing numbers, you have 2 sets of them.
Yeah.
I couldn't answer his question. Who was that?
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody in? I said when Walt Morgan gets here, because I thought he's going to be here, he can answer. Does anybody know what the 2 sets are? What is it? Half frames, maybe? Yeah. They're half frames.
Right. Those are field times rather than frame times, right? Okay. Well, we'll put up the when we find it in another presentation. We'll put up the numbers. But I just want to say how grateful I am to IOTA for developing the VTI and making it available. The Kiwi boxes were getting very rare and scarce, and this makes it possible for us to do this work at the high resolution timing that we can do, and at a reasonable cost. So my personal thanks.
Thank you, Ted.